Good morning. Thank you for coming this morning, and thanks to our guests for being here. So we all know Wilmington is growing. We all know the region will continue to grow and provide people with places to live, work, and play is a necessary part of that. What we don't always know is exactly what projects are in the works. What is being built here or there? What will the city do to keep up with growth? What infrastructure can we put in place to bring jobs here? These are things the people on the stage do know, and this event today provides us with an opportunity to hear directly from them more details about and insight into what they're working on. Our panel includes Brian Eckel, co-founder of Cape Fear Commercial and partner in Cape Fear Development, Andy Hewitt, partner in Soda Pop district development firm Parish Stream Development, Donna Girardo, Chief Strategy Officer for CIL Capital and Chair of the New Hanover County Planning Board, Wilmington's Mayor for Life, Bill Saffo, and last but not at all least, developer David Swain of Swain & Associates. So before we start, I want to take a second to let everyone in the audience know that you can text your questions for the panel to the number that's listed in your program. Please include your name and table number, and we can get the mic to you to ask your question. So I'd like to start our program by having each of you take a minute or two to describe the developments you're working on before we get into some of the specifics of your projects, and also tackle topics that include how the economy is impacting development and, good stuff like that. So Brian, starting with you, your firm has been working on the New Hanover County Government Center, as well as looking into how you could get involved with the potential Project Grace redevelopment. Can you take a couple minutes to give us like a broad overview of where it stands?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us, CC. Thanks, Rob, and the Greater Wilmington Business team for putting on this great venue. Excited to be here. The New Hanover County employees are super excited right now to move into the new 130,000 square foot building. They've been in the old Marketplace Mall for the last 20 years, which served its purpose, but they're actually moving in this month, which is super exciting for them, and really that's what this project was all about, the New Hanover County employees. So the building, when we do projects, we really have themes around it. This project, the theme was resiliency and efficiency. They were coming from an extremely inefficient building, so we wanted to create a new home for them that was extremely efficient. We did that. One of the many cool things about this building is the new 30,000 square foot emergency operations center and 911 center. We built this structure to withstand winds up to 165 miles per hour, which will be the command center for the next hurricane. Unfortunately, we will have them. So everybody in this room can be proud of the protection that this new facility is going to serve. That's phase one of this project. Phase two is demolition of the existing mall after the employees move out of it. Part of phase two, we're going to build a front lawn. I don't know if you've been by there, but it looks a little awkward right now. We literally built the building directly beside the existing building. So we tear that down, we build a front lawn. It's the size of a football field, and it's going to be a great amenity for the New Hanover County employees. Phase three is the private side. It was a public-private partnership where we purchased the land from New Hanover County, and we're going to build a mixed-use development, 250 units with retail underneath. Project Grace, I'm in a little bit of a different spot with Project Grace. There's no formal commitment from the county or from us to actually pursue Project Grace. We started working on this project looking at the due diligence and digging in November on our own time and resources and see if it's a project that we want to pursue. The more we've done a lot of community engagement, the more feedback that we've heard from the community, the more we're excited about possibly and potentially being a part of the project.
Thank you. And Andy, can you tell us what exactly is the Soda Pop District and what's happening there?
Yeah, so first off, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. The Soda Pop District, and there's some differing opinions, but loosely setting the boundaries from 7th to 12th Street between Market and Chestnut, with really Princess Street being that main commercial corridor. And the name which we can thank Dan Brawley of Cucalores for, but it really pays homage to the bottling history, which most people focus on the Coca-Cola bottling plant, but even prior to that, two other bottling facilities were there. There was the Electric Soda Pop Company at 1002 Princess Street, the Wilmington Soda Pop Company at 920 Princess Street, and then the Hugh Tafts that started the Coca-Cola bottling facility where it was today, which eventually was Coca-Cola acquired those other two. But that is the loose district in definition.
Okay. And Donna, what project are you helping to create, and why is it important?
Well, I'm really excited about being here this morning because I know and love this community, and I think you all realize that. And to be able to bring you this opportunity, I think that CIL Capital is offering us, I think is extraordinary. And so what we're planning on doing, we've got a very aggressive schedule, and I'll get more into details because the question I get all the time is why Wilmington? Why Wilmington? And there's a lot of good reasons. But what we're looking at having on the ground within the next 18 months is $250 million worth of investment. 4 buildings, 4 parcels, and 1.5 million square feet under roof. So that is pretty aggressive, but we're moving forward with the times as fast as we can. And our first building, this is, as you know, cold storage pharmaceuticals, and I'll tell you how this all came about when we get to that point. But the first building is going to be clinical trials and things like that. We're working with some of the world's largest, the nation's largest pharmaceutical companies to provide cold storage for their pharmaceuticals. In fact, when I say cold storage, we're talking maybe minus 86 degrees Celsius. So that's pretty cold. And then our second building will be to service more or less the RTP, the triangle, and create a direct route directly to the coast for them for shipping and flexibility and timeliness. And then our third building is going to be DOD, VA, CDC. We're talking to these government agencies about supplying the southeastern region of this country with the pharmaceutical drugs. Our fourth building is already open. It's over on 23rd Street. We just call it 805. Very creative. That's the address, 805 23rd Street. But the 23rd Street, we have bought it from Adams Beverage, who's building a new facility, as you all know, in Brunswick County. And they'll be moving down there shortly. So we'll take over the whole building as soon as they move out. Right now, we've got about 50% of that building. And that building is going to be used in the future for returns, for recalls, for defective drugs and things like that. It's more or less just to store and return those drugs that are no longer useful in the marketplace. So thank you, Cece.
And Mayor Saffo, can you tell us which floor of the Thermo Fisher building can we expect your office to be on? Seriously though, tell us briefly about the city's efforts to buy the tallest building, and also how that could fit in with the Northern Gateway project.
Well, the city's not really working that hard on the Thermo Fisher. We're working right now bringing the Red Hot Chili Peppers here. Dave Matthew tickets here is what we're working on. No, seriously, we are working with Thermo Fisher and evaluating that building for the city. The city has been talking about space assessment needs for over 20 years. So it checks a lot of the boxes in respect to we need parking on the north end, which has an 1,100 car parking deck. We also have got space needs. The city's got buildings scattered throughout our community. We've got 8 different buildings, so we'll be divesting ourselves of those buildings and putting them back into the private sector if we move forward with it. So we have until about mid-June to do this, and at that point in time, we'll determine whether we think it's the right thing to do or not, plus the fact that we're also working on the Gateway project.
And in case you missed it, he was saying they have until mid-June to evaluate it, the due diligence period for the
Correct.
Thermo Fisher building, and we can get into the Gateway project a little bit later. So, David, you mentioned in our conversation before this that people often ask you exactly what is happening on Military Cutoff and Eastwood Roads. Tell us about CenterPoint.
Well, I'm glad to do that. Cece came to me and said, I'd like for you to talk to her a little bit. And then this morning she said, spend 2 or 3 minutes on it. I've been working on it for 6 years, so I'm going to try to bring it a little concise here. Yes, we do own the property. It's 23 acres. It's located at virtually the intersection of Eastwood and Military Cutoff Road. The DOT has come in, taken 3.5 of our acres for a new diverter highway that will come in at the Drysdale entrance of a landfall, follow the back wall of Eastport, and then be another stoplight. This will help the city or the DOT to build a flyover, which will fly over Military Cutoff Road. Eastwood will be elevated over across the intersection, coming down, feeding into Wrightsville Beach. There will be no stoplights at that intersection once the bridge has been built. So what we're doing, we have taken a piece of property that I have been looking at for at least 20 years since I've been down there. We finally struck a deal. The difficulty and the reason it has not been developed before was multiple fold. One, it was an extremely expensive piece of property. Two, it was zoned residential. There were 2 houses on the property. So the only way that we could make the sense out of the dollars that we would have to spend on it was to have some new rules and regulations as far as building codes, requirements, height restrictions. We met with the city. We've spent 2 years with the city, talked with them how we could do things that would make sense to the community. It would enhance the community. It would help the tax base. And we came up with a new ordinance that the city worked very closely with us on, which allowed us to go up in height. Otherwise, if we couldn't have gone up, we couldn't have generated the revenues that were required to build the project. So everything's been directed around that. Since that period of time, we've spent endless hours with architects, with engineers, getting things in order. We know what we want to do. We presented what we wanted to do 3 years ago on this stage in November of, I think it was 3 years ago. It is morphing a bit now because the world has started to change on us, specifically related to office buildings and needs for office buildings, and people are going to come back. But all the grading that you see being done out there is all of our property, plus the property where DOT is building their road. The first phase, there's a stream that runs down through the middle of the property. We have 6.5 acres on one side. We have the balance, roughly 18 acres on the other side that where we can do our development. We're doing all of our infrastructure, road networks, water, sewer, curb, gutter at the present time. It's taken a year for us to do all of that. On the northwest side of the property, in that 6.5 acres, we will start that end of the project first. And our greatest and the prettiest building, and probably the highest quality building you'll find in this part of the world, is an apartment complex, 75 feet in height. It has on the first level, we will be having retail on the first level, restaurants on the first level, and then the flights of apartments above that will be Class A, high quality units. We'll build 351 of them. There'll be roughly 340,000 square feet in that one building, plus we have structured parking that wraps around it to cover all the parking for the apartment complex. Out front of that, running out to the Military Cutoff Road, we will be building 4 buildings there that will all be retail, restaurants, boutique shops, a lot like what we did at the Forum. People like that, but there will be a lot of outside seating and dining areas associated with it. There'll be about 30,000 square feet, about 36,000 square feet if you consider the retail going on the base of the apartment complex. All of that's getting started now. We will bring it all to the table simultaneously. The retail will probably be 6 months before we start breaking ground on it. The apartments, we're already in the process of doing that. So as it all comes up, we'll open all of that section at one time. In the interim, as you cross the creek, go towards Eastwood, a lot of things up in the air what we want to do. I know I'm going to build an office building for our office and some other people just as you cross the creek. We're going to put a high-end boutique hotel out there. We haven't identified who we want at this point, but that'll be at the corner. And then we'll have plenty of room if we want to do office. If we want to do, we'll have a lot more retail over there. We'll end up with about 135,000 square feet of retail. Whether
Thank
we
you,
build
David.
any more apartments and all, I'm not quite sure. So I have given up my 3 minutes, so we.
Thank you, David.
And by the way, I want to introduce you. My group is sitting back here. We have 5 people sitting around the table. They are our top people. They're the smartest people. And we got a new person in waiting that's learning. She's 12 years old. She sits there, and she's my son's daughter, so she'll be running this thing in about 20 years. So just wanted y'all to know that. And one last thing, I got 2 more people that I didn't even know were here in the office. Both of them retired way young. Claude Arnold and Alex Thorpe, key people, have been with us for years. They're no longer with us, but I bet they're thinking about us. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Saffo, I'm going to come back to you. Could you just repeat what you were talking about before with the Thermo Fisher building? Because your mic was cutting in and out. And then I'll ask you my next question.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So the city is in the process of evaluating the Thermo Fisher building. We have 120 days to evaluate the project, and we also have to work with the local government commission in Raleigh to make certain that the financing package that we will be presenting to the citizens and to the state is something that they can live with. As we have seen in the past, they can either call it up or call it down, but it does check a lot of the boxes the city has been talking about for going back over 20 years in regards to our space needs. The city has 8 buildings scattered throughout, and we have employees all over the community, and they range in buildings that are that were built in the 1920s to the 1950s. These buildings are antiquated, they're old. We spend about $4.2 million a year just maintaining those buildings, upgrading them. A lot of the buildings that we are in are functionally just obsolete, and they just need to be either redone, or we have to look for an opportunity to go into a new building. The city did do an assessment of 305, which is the building right next door on Chestnut, 305 Chestnut Street. The city evaluated taking that building down, rebuilding it with a parking deck, and the cost of that at that time when we did it about a year ago was about $90 to $96 million. The city said, whoa, let's reevaluate our position. And then the Thermo Fisher building became available. Thermo Fisher, the group approached the city of Wilmington about the possibility of purchasing all of that property. It obviously takes care of a lot of our parking needs. There's an 1,100 car parking deck on that end that would be used obviously by the people that are in the building, which would be city employees, because the city would not take the entire building, but about 6 floors of that building, and then the other part would be Thermo Fisher and the possibility of another private sector company moving into that building with the city. Then it would be used in the evening for concerts. As you well know, we have a pretty healthy concert series this year, about 30 dates, and a lot of people come down there, so it'll take care of those parking needs down there. It would take care of our security needs. Every government, from local to state to federal, are dealing with security issues, so it would meet those particular needs, as well as our IT issues. Upgrading our IT is critically important to the functioning of our city government, and we're constantly having to upgrade. And if you looked at our IT department, or where our IT sits and the brains of the city, you would be appalled. And so we're evaluating it and to determine whether we think it's a good deal or not, and asking a lot of good questions. City council members asking a lot of great questions. Citizens have approached us about things that they want to know and questions that they have, and we're asking those questions on behalf of those citizens. So we're doing a thorough evaluation before we make a determination whether this is the right thing for our community or not.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you on the Northern Gateway, but I wanted to ask you, Brian, for just like if you can elaborate a little more on what you hope to do, like why you think it's important to look at that block that holds the library there on Chestnut and Third. Why look at it for Project Grace? Why redevelop it?
Well, it's a complete block that's owned by one user, which is super unique, number one, in downtown Wilmington. And I think we've all seen what's happened in downtown Wilmington behind us and beside us over the last 10 years. So there's no doubt that downtown Wilmington has really transformed over the last decade. But this block is still a blighted block, honestly, that happens to be in the center of Wilmington. So when we approached the county in November, they said, absolutely, take a look at it. You know, we want creative ideas. And so we fortunately had already had a lot of work that Zimmer and LS3P and Monteith had already done. So it was pretty easy for us to jump in and really streamline our due diligence. But I haven't met anyone talking to the community, even some of the people that are against some of the kit of parts and components of the development that don't agree that that block needs to be redeveloped.
Okay, and along the lines of redevelopment, Andy, why did you want to work in the Soda Pop district and kind of redevelop that area and make it into a place where people would want to be?
Yeah, so similar to one of Brian's comments, there was a lot of property that could be assembled, and to achieve something as far as multiple components, you need that amount of property. But you know, the test pilot was really started in 2019, which was the acquisition of what is now Highwire and Cagina Forno. And once we understood the success of that, and that not only could we recruit good tenants, that people in the community would show up to support those businesses, you know, it was immediate at that point that there was more to be done over there. As far as the Soda Pop district itself, by definition, I've kind of set those boundaries in my first answer, but our project right now, we've assembled roughly 8 acres, which is mostly, we've got 4 acres of essential vertical infill, which is land, and 5 buildings of roughly 125,000 square feet. So we've assembled roughly just shy of 4 city blocks. That being able to do that, you know, quite frankly, talking with Sandy, we're fairly young in our career, but this may be the only time we were able to assemble something of this nature in the city of Wilmington. And so that's what really attracted us to the project. The other thing being its central location, right? It's 4 blocks from the courthouse. It's next door to the high school. You know, it's 2 miles from the hospital. There's apartments, affordable housing. There's houses in the 200 to 400 range. A half mile away, there's houses in the 500 to $1 million range. And so it just seemed like a great opportunity to assemble these properties and focus on the redevelopment.
Thank you. Ian, I'm going to go back to you, Mayor, because we're going to do a little bit more on downtown right now. If you could explain the city's vision for the Northern Gateway and that redevelopment project.
Well, the city has always been concerned in respect to the gateways into our community. That's one of the things that the citizens have told us over a number of years is they want to see an improvement as you come into the city of Wilmington, wherever you're coming from, just the look. And there's no way that we can tell private development how to develop their property. I mean, obviously we have planning processes and ordinances that they have to follow. But as far as what it looks like, we can't make that determination unless we own the property. And the city made a very important decision in acquiring some of that property up at the Northern Gateway so we would have a say in how that property would be redeveloped. We've had a great partnership with East West that did the River Place development right up the street here, and turned out to be a great project. It was a parking deck that was not generating any tax revenue for our community. It was a deck that was going to have to come down and be redeveloped, and the city said, hey, let's take a look at possibly doing a public-private partnership where we generate tax revenue for our community and for the city, as well as redevelop the parking deck. And I think we've done it in a manner that I think is good. So this is going to be very similar to that in respect that We will have a mixed-use development there that would involve housing or apartments or condos, what have you. It would involve some parking. It would involve a hotel. It would involve an office building. And it would also possibly involve a food hall. That's one of the concepts that we're talking about currently that you may have seen in other communities. And it's a kind of a gateway into our new Live Oak Pavilion there, which is very popular, and being able to close off that street and be able to use it in a way that we would like, I think is very important. So we have a seat at the table as a city to determine what that project would look like, and we're doing it with partners that we have had business dealings with before, that we trust, that we've had a good working relationship with, and hopefully it will come to a culmination very quickly. I know our interim city attorney is working on that deal right now with our staff, and hopefully we'll have a good project to present to the community when it's finally sealed and done. Thank you.
And after this, we can all tell the mayor what kind of grocery store and restaurants we want there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to turn to an audience question. So Bobby Krogan at table 53 has a question.
Hello. My question related to kind of master development of the city. I hear of, Soda Pop district here, another district here with housing and retail, but they seem to be spots here and there. It doesn't seem like the city has a plan, it's a cohesive plan to really understand what goes where in the city and what best suits those areas. I hear apartments and things like that, but they're usually 1 or 2 person condos. We're missing family size apartments. We're doing retail, but we're missing libraries. We're doing, restaurants, but we're missing medical facilities. So all these developments seem to be disconnected from one another to really understand the massive impact on the city as a whole, going back to a more inclusive master plan.
So your question is, how will the city handle that?
How is the city in a more broad scope looking at master planning and making sure that each of these areas in the city is getting what they need?
I guess I'll answer the question since I'm the lead dog here on that. But I will tell you that the city spent a tremendous amount of time and effort and took a lot of input from citizens just like yourself in respect to what the city will look like in the next 20 to 30 years through our comprehensive land use plan that we just approved about 2 years ago. There was a lot of time and effort put into that. The last time we had a comprehensive land use plan that was created was in the 1980s. So the development patterns of the community, the living patterns of each and every one of us has changed dramatically since the 1980s. And the city has, through its comprehensive land use plan, has addressed the concerns and the issues that the citizens have shared with us. First of all, they want more walkability. They want their businesses or they want services closer to where they live. They want to be able to have more open space. They wanted more protection of their trees and tree canopy. And they just want a better looking city. And I think the comprehensive land use plan that we've put in place addresses that. Now, there will be some changes to it. In theory, things look good on paper, but in reality, sometimes when we're dealing with the private sector, it doesn't always turn out the way we think it should. And then we make adjustments based on that. And there will be density. There, obviously, in a city of Wilmington, which encompasses 51 square miles, where we're about 95% built out, we are talking about more density, but density in specific areas and specific places, not all over, but in specific areas. And I think that we'll be able to address that. And going back to these districts like Andy and his partners are working on, these districts, and we've seen it become very popular, which kind of ties into this concept of neighborhoods, where you have the Soda Pop district, you have the Cargo district, you have South Front Street, you have North 4th Street. You have these little districts that have been created and people love them because they can walk to them. In some cases, they're even destinations now. But I think we'll see more and more of that as the community grows. It gets a little bit harder to get around as opposed to when I grew up here, where you could get from one end of the town to the other in about 20 minutes or 15 minutes. So those things are going to change over time. And these districts that they are created are going to continue to become more and more popular as time grows. So The city has spent a lot of time and effort in this new comprehensive land use plan. It's only been in existence now for 2 years. There's some quirks that we'll work out from time to time, but I think that the city's moving in the right direction in respect to talking and tackling its growth issues, as well as the way people want to see the city develop.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. The city actually encourages mixed-use development. It wasn't too long ago when I was sitting in city council chambers and there was about, not quite 600, I think there was about 400 red shirts in there that were trying to oppose a rezoning at Alden Hall for mixed use. Mayor Sappho was a council member at that time, and he remembers the pressure that they were under, the city was under, to not allow mixed use. Now, here we are, 10, 12 years later, and mixed use is not only encouraged, it's actually required in most of our zoning. So the city has the foresight to realize that the closer we can put commercial and a mixed use with residential, the better internal capture, the better it is for traffic. So I would answer the question that the city's already on that master plan.
And I would echo that. Prior to being in Wilmington was in Charleston and knew that at some point we would be in Wilmington. My wife grew up here, and the first thing I started doing, besides we'd come visit her family and I'd grab a cup of coffee on Saturday morning, drive around, see what's going on, was starting to look at the Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and then looking at the zoning districts via the Land Development Code. And that, if you haven't taken the time to look at those and you want to know what the city's direction is or vision is, that they've laid the framework for some of those, or some of us as developers on the private side, to point us in the right direction. So the CenterPoint district was rezoned to urban mixed use. If you look at it in the Land Development Code, it was encouraged for mixed use, like Brian was saying. It was also referenced in the comprehensive plan. And so, for example, in that project, the Land Development Code was being rewritten while we were under contract on the Coca-Cola building. And one of our visions for the Coca-Cola building was to preserve the use of light manufacturing and distribution essentially as an urban makerspace. And we worked through that with the city. And I think that what makes our project in particular unique, that I can speak to, but I think everybody up here can speak to in different forms or fashions of their projects, is we were able to work with the city on those things by using some of this direction and guidelines. When we needed questions and feedback, they provided it. And I think that's a really nice environment to be working in that is not always typical. But that has ended up resulting in the soda pop district, at least as far as our project. The Coke building is done. We have welcomed 16 new businesses that are now employing over 100 people, anywhere from a brewery at Highwire to a restaurant, but also we have a couple of nonprofits. We have somebody manufacturing shipping containers, converting them into affordable housing offices. We have a cabinet maker. We have a relationship and tenant basis with the movie production facilities. And so all of that came out of some form and direction of the comprehensive plan and of the Land Development Code. And so you might see just projects going up here and there, but if you dig in and the things that we're looking at as developers, there is a little bit of structure there that's pointing that direction.
And David, so they've been talking about how the mixed use concept and some of the other concepts included in the city's comprehensive plan are enabling developers to do things that can address questions like, how are we handling growth? Do you have, what was your idea with CenterPoint being a mixed use project? Why did you want to do that?
Let me pause 1 minute before I answer that question, but go back to the gentleman's question that was asked out there. It was, the way I heard the question was, how can the city direct people to go to certain areas and develop those areas? The city really can't do that. And it's not the role for the city to determine exactly where everything should be built, no. It's going to be, we're going to determine where it needs to be built by the market. If we have you're going to find Wilmington is like most larger cities, there are pod developments around the city. If you look at the various pods, our pod is at the intersection where we're getting ready to build this development. We've got landfall there, we've got Riceville Beach, we've got the growth pattern that's going up towards Pender County. So we're building for that pod. We're not necessarily trying to get the people all the way down at Monkey Junction to come see us. That's not what we want. We want to serve a purpose for a community. If you go over to where the Camera Museum is, there's another pod there. They're building the residential all around it. The residential requires grocery stores. That's why they get built. Downtown is developing. When I came here 33 years ago, downtown was really in a shambles. It was not the kind of place that I wanted to go. Now, it has changed dramatically, and a big part of it is what Billy's done to make that happen. You want a grocery store downtown. You're at a point right now that you can probably attract a grocery store. All of the housing has come up. All of the apartments down the river is refreshed. It's inviting. The hotels are there. The convention center's there. So people want to go downtown. People are living downtown. They don't want to have to drive to the mall. They don't want to have to drive to us to go to the grocery stores. So the grocery store is in the near future. I'm not saying it is now. It's not determined by the city and us. It's determined by the Harris Teeters of the world, of the people that actually own that grocery store. They project their volume, and we've done 30 grocery stores in our career, and the only way you get them is that it is justifiable and they know the sales volume is going to be there. So that's what's happening.
I'm just going to echo that because we do grocery store development as well, and it is in the very near future. A grocery store absolutely wants to be downtown. They're looking for the right site. So with what Mayor Sapo is potentially doing with the PPD and opening up lots of other opportunities for redevelopment, I think you'll see it in the very, very near future.
Okay, I'm going to turn just for a minute from the mixed use and redevelopment question and put one over to you, Donna. So I'm going to let Donna scoop me just this once. When it comes to her project, I believe she has some breaking news she can share with us.
Well, the breaking news, and thank you to my friends at the Airport Authority last night. We have been, we've been hoping to pick up a parcel out there for the last 2 years, and they voted to allow us to lease that last night, which I think will just enhance that campus out there at the airport tremendously, because between this parcel and our parcel now that we're pouring 500,000 square feet of concrete on it right now. That's going to be our largest building. So between these two parcels are some wetlands. So we're going to be transforming those into passive recreational and walking trails and picnic tables and things like that. So I think it'll just enhance the campus out there tremendously. And so thank you. In fact, for this whole project, we've had tremendous support from WBD, from the county, from the city, from everyone from the Chamber of Commerce to UNCW to Cape Fear Community College. We're going to be doing a lot of our labor recruitment. We're blessed with that area north of us, with all of the veterans and retired military and the folks that want to stay in this area when they complete their service. And so this is a highly regulated industry. You have to be CMGP certified to get into it. And something I learned about the pharmaceutical industry, which I found very interesting, and one of the reasons it's so highly regulated, obviously, because of drugs that are not what they're supposed to be. You've got black drugs from the black market. You've got drugs that just really come from outside the country that can't be tested or can't be relied upon. And so every time a drug is touched, and this really goes into the cost of the drug, every time it's touched, it's got to be scanned. So when it comes out of R&D, it's scanned. When it goes on the shelf, it's scanned. When it comes off the shelf and goes in the truck, it's scanned. When it's put on a pallet, it's scanned. So we'll be bringing in DHS and FedEx directly. Our main building, the 500,000 square feet, now under construction, sits right directly on the runway. And so we'll be bringing in global drugs and things like that. We'll have a customs facility right in that building to do nothing but just process our drugs. And the good thing about the second building that we're going to be servicing RTP and the smaller drug companies is that right now we're shipping all of our drugs to Philly and Newark. And this will allow, and the state's very excited about this will allow us to open up a corridor from RTP directly to the coast for shipping. So they're very excited. They're very excited to keep this industry in this state and to keep the tax money in this state, obviously, too. So.
Thank you. So we have a question from Natalie English at table 10.
So we know as our population continues to grow, we need additional housing units at every level, right? And we're racing to try to keep up with the growth that's coming, whether we keep up with it or not. We know that households brings retail, restaurants, et cetera. That's all great. Our small business economic development team tells me the biggest struggle they have is when an existing small business in our community wants to grow, expand, add more jobs, make more investment. We're struggling to help them find space. Can you talk a little bit about any plans or goals to help with existing small business growth by increasing industrial and commercial facilities?
Who would like to address that first?
Probably could all answer that. I would say, Natalie, please put them in touch with me. We, I think Will Leonard and our firm has done, I think, over 500,000 feet of industrial, maybe more actually. So they're continuing to build spec industrial along the 421 corridor and in Leland. We're getting ready to start our 4th office building at Autumn Hall. You might have seen the site cleared. Mayor Sappho is going to have quite a bit of space available for lease if that deal ends up going through. So, you know, it's a tough market right now to go build spec anything, really. But it's pretty easy to be a developer when you got a lease in your hand. So I would say, please put them in touch with us.
And Andy, you have small businesses that are going into or have been going into the soda pop district. I mean, that's been giving some space to those folks.
Right, yeah, so we, I mentioned it in my previous comment, but since 2020, we've welcomed 16 new businesses just in our project alone in the soda pop district, not including other people's properties that they're working on. But I'd also echo Brian, you know, please let Sandy and I know if there's a particular type of space. We're quickly filling up over there. Our existing buildings are roughly 80% full, but we do have our turn towards land. We have a couple of parcels that we will build based on what the demand is. So Natalie, you know, knowing what that demand is, hearing from the chamber and our other economic development groups in Wilmington, as developers or commercial brokers, the more we know, the more that's going to drive what we do. Similar to Brian's comment, you know, it's a lot easier to go take a project down with a tenant in hand. One of our other strategies is the adaptive reuse. It's so much faster to deliver space. It has its pluses and minuses. There can be buildings with a lot of character that we're preserving, which are a lot of fun. It's also, you can't give somebody the perfect space. But I know that, you know, at least from our business model, and I think that others, developers, you'll probably see people trying to do more adaptive reuse to deliver projects and space to these businesses at a quicker pace.
And David, I believe you had something you wanted to add.
It really depends the type of merchant you're talking about. And it can be anywhere from a person that sells lawnmowers and small tractors to a person that sells dresses and ties and coats and shirts. We've owned a lot of commercial real estate over the years, shopping centers. We've had up to 3 million square feet of space. We try to monitor every tenant within our operation, and we try to be close enough to them that we know what they're doing. They are to share with us sales. If we look at sales and we see sales are $200 a square foot, we know they're teetering. If it's $600 a square foot, we know we need to expand them. So often in our company, we will go to these people and say, the volume of your sales are exceeding what you should be doing. We're delighted. We need to give you more space. We would like to make room for you to go to another location and prosper even that much more. So anytime you're working with people like this, if they're getting at a point where they feel like they can't handle their customer base, they need to talk with someone that's in the business, and we can help you with that.
Well, just from the private, I mean, from the public sector, I want to give a big shout out to the New Hanover County Commissioners for having the vision to work with the private sector to putting up an industrial park up near off 540, and I appreciate that. We all saw the success of Pender Industrial Park and what WBD has been able to do out there with a number of tenants, and to see the success of that park and the number of jobs that are created, and that was direct investment by those county commissioners in Pender and in New Hanover, and we're starting to see an industrial park along the 74-76 corridor near Riegelwood, and that the Camerons are doing out there. So everybody has seen this model, and it works. In addition to that, the public investment of running water and sewer up 421 has been a game changer. And if you haven't been up 421 to see the number of buildings that have been built and created up there because of that, you should, and it's paying dividends. And so we, as from the public sector, have got to make the investments necessary for water and sewer, and in some cases purchasing a property to create the development opportunities for the future.
I think I'm given a little bit of a different perspective too, and Natalie, as usual, is right on. You know, if you own land, you pay taxes on it, you're entitled to develop it. And at the same time, the commissioners have been kind enough to appoint me 3 times now to the county's planning board. This is my 4th term as chair. And I see it at the guttural level. In fact, I'm going to see it again tonight at the guttural level. We have a planning board meeting tonight again. And, you know, I was telling one of the commissioners earlier, one of the projects last month, we had 144 emails and letters in opposition. My voicemail blew up. And, you know, there's a frustration level rising out there as well. And, you know, Sam, Frank, and I have talked about this, where it used to be on the planning board, we'd see schools, environment, flooding, traffic. Now all we see is traffic, 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 traffic. And there's no simple solutions. Mike Kozlowski and I exchange. He's kind enough to put up with my emails. You know, what can we do here, Mike? But the fact is that we've got to find some sort of solution that can bring everybody to the table, where it doesn't stop growth, it provides housing for everyone, and at the same time provides a quality of life. But the fact that there's no money out there right now, and we have, 6 or 8 main roads going north and south and east and west, nobody likes connectivity, and so we're all on the same roads every morning. There's no easy solution, but I see the frustration level with the public rising out there, and I think that needs to be part of our conversation too in moving forward.
And David, you had something to add?
Which brings me back to CenterPoint. That is exactly what CenterPoint is designed to do. We're trying to have a live, work, and play in the same community. By doing that, we're building the multifamily so we will have 350 people in that complex. They can park their cars there. There are all kinds of facilities within the development that they can enjoy, everything from fitness to bikes to the likes. They can walk straight out their front door, and there's a restaurant. Maybe they just want to go have a glass of wine or something. Maybe they want a full dinner. They can sit outside and enjoy the company. If they need to go to a bank, we'll have banks out there. People can walk over to the banks. They can go to their offices, there are hotels there if they want to bring friends in to stay there. So the whole purpose of a mixed-use project, and you're seeing them, but you're not seeing many of them, even around all of North Carolina, is the purpose is to bring everybody together so they don't have to go get in their car and drive 3 blocks to a grocery store. They don't have to go 2 miles away to a restaurant because there'll be multiple restaurants. And so that's the whole purpose of CenterPoint, and I am enthusiastic about it. In the 70s, it was the mall concept. The mall concept was great. The problem with the mall concept, it was anchored by several major tenants that had 50,000 square feet. Those guys have gotten in trouble. They're not doing the same thing they're doing. Our mall here was a great mall, and it's got some troubles. It's coming back. They're really working with it. But what we will see over the next 15 years will be a mixed-use project. And I'm just delighted we're bringing the truly first mixed-use project to Wilmington.
Okay, and I've got an audience question, table 54, Elizabeth Redenbaugh. I can ask it for you. So Elizabeth's question is, what measures can be taken to prevent gentrification from displacing low-income residents?
Well,
Say that again.
What measures can be taken to prevent gentrification from displacing low-income residents?
well, I guess I can answer that because that's one of the discussions that we've been having for quite some time. We have several programs in place that we can help those that want to stay in the neighborhoods that are being gentrified. As the area continues to grow and more people pour into this area, the areas that we may have felt were maybe undesirable now are desirable. The entire city is desirable, so people are going everywhere purchasing properties. There was a lot of rental properties, especially on the north end here, that have been now bought by citizens that are fixing them up and moving into them. The depreciation value of those properties over the long term has played out, and people are being offered a tremendous amount of money. And in capitalism, it's going to happen. If you go up there and I can't stop somebody from selling their property or what you can rent property for. That's up to the private sector, to the individual. But what we can do is where we can help them with rental assistance for those that need to stay in those houses or like to stay in those homes. The city does have a program that we will help them with rental assistance. We will also help those landlords that would like to keep their properties in place for a number of years. We have a program in place to help those as long as they keep them affordable. We have a HOP program that helps people to get first-time home buyers where we buy down the rate from the city's perspective using CDBG funding, which is a program that was started by Lyndon Johnson many years ago to help blighted areas. So there are a number of programs that the city has if the citizen wants to partake or participate in those programs. And we have, from a city's perspective, we have generated about 700 affordable homes in the city because the city has been in the affordable housing business since the mid-1990s. And so we will continue to make investments in those areas. We will continue to try to put more affordable housing and to keep people in those neighborhoods if they so choose.
And turning to, well, going along with affordable housing, Brian, so the Government Center project, the apartments there are going to have 5% of the apartments are going to be affordable to people with at the median income.
Yeah, 80% of AMI, yeah.
Okay, and then so what do you think could be done to address affordable housing in addition to things like your project?
Yeah, well, you know, most new developments you see have some percentage of affordable housing. I call it more workforce housing. Affordable housing can be mean different things to different people. And you know, we spent a lot of time talking with our team about this. When we commit to do a certain percentage, 5 or 10%, We're doing it typically to try and get the density that's required. But the model in our mind doesn't really make sense. If we're giving 10% to affordable housing and essentially subsidizing it, we're just making the other 90% slightly less affordable. So it's a complex problem. It's, Mike Brown and I were talking about the other day, it's kind of like healthcare. It's a broken system, and how do we address it? We actually started talking, brainstorming recently and said, well, here's an idea. And we actually modeled this out in a financial pro forma. What if we had a landowner that was a municipality? What if we came to the table as a developer and said, you know what, we're not gonna make money on this deal. We're gonna cover our costs, but this is not gonna be a profit center. We went to a builder in this community and said, what if you came to the table and helped us cut your cost? We went and talked to lenders and said, and I think it would be multiple lenders. I don't think it would be one lender that would participate, and said, what if you helped us and cut your cost? We can't underestimate government regulation, so we would go to the city or the county at that point and say, here's what we're trying to do. We want to streamline this development. We're not asking to not build sidewalks or put in trees. We just want to streamline the process, which would save costs. And then we went to impact investors, and there's tons of them in this community, probably tons of them in this room, and said, what if you invested with us on this project, and instead of making 2x like you may make in my typical development, you're going to make 3%. You're going to make what you would make sitting in the bank. And we modeled that out. We ended up cutting out millions of dollars in this financial model, and then we just goal-seeked for rents and said, if we were building our typical complex, 250 units, high-end finishes, same amenities, nothing different at all, we could lower our rents by $400 to $500 a month. And so instead of doing the 5%, the 10%, I think you still have to do that because every bit helps. But to really make a big impact, I think you can do several hundred units at a time. We need 10,000 units, I think is a study, might be more actually, in this community. So how do we make a big impact instead of a developer doing 5 or 10% at a time? I think that's one idea. There's many ideas. Commissioner Barfield and I are actually on a Duke Leadership Forum, spent the last 2 days together this week, trying to address this issue. So there's a lot of smart people working on it. There's a lot of will, but I think it's gonna have to take everybody on the continuum of housing to come together.
Donna, what's your input on that?
I'm with Brian 100% there, absolutely, he's right on track. And, you know, I think, you know, New Hanover County, Brunswick County, there's probably half of Brunswick County still that's developable. Pender County, still a large amount of land up there. New Hanover County, I don't have to tell you all, we're running out of land very quickly, and a lot of our land that's still left is junk land that is really difficult to develop on, and it's gotten very expensive. We've started doing with a lot of different issues, as you all know over the years, to do more regional type coordination and working together, our elected officials, our universities, and our development community. And, you know, maybe affordable housing is one of those regional issues that we should be looking at from that level, and David is absolutely correct. You know, you need to put your businesses, you need to put your jobs and your support services into your housing. That's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward on this. Something that came to me with my relationship with CIL over the last year and a half since they came to the airport, was that there was an FBO out there at the airport that when they asked me to come out a while back to shovel some dirt, to turn over the dirt, I asked, what took you all so long? And they said, well, you know, we're not from this area. Our GC's not from this area. We didn't know what kind of permits were needed. We didn't know what kind of forms. We didn't know what the process was, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, the airport started working with these folks that we were bringing in. And, you know, it occurred to me at that point when CIL approached me about a year and a half ago to locate out there, I told them, I said, I promise you we will help you get through this permitting process so that when we go out and WBD and everybody else in the city and the county spend so much money to bring in relocating businesses and all, we say, welcome, we're glad you're here, we'll cut your ribbon, and then that's it. And I've had people say to me out there with these projects at the airport, they've never seen these permits and all done in less than 6 months. And that includes the FAA permits. And if y'all haven't been through the FAA process, my friend Grants or Dick there has. And that is, it's very time-consuming and very difficult. So, you know, the fact of when we bring in these people on a regional basis, we should be recruiting businesses on a regional basis, not for one county versus another specifically, but, and then help them get on their feet, help them get through these processes as quickly as possible. You all know the expression, time is money, so.
Mayor.
Well, I just want to say, you know, I know a lot of builders, and you've got 10,000 customers that need affordable housing. If they could build it, they would.
They would.
But there's a lot of things that go into affordable housing. Your land cost is primarily one of the #1 drivers. And when you're paying $75, $80, $85, $90,000 today for an average lot that are maybe 40 feet wide to 60 feet wide, it's hard to make those numbers work. And unless government at some level gets in it and incentivizes it, it's not going to happen. And what I mean by that is, you know, we talk about incentivizing as is a bad word at times. But remember, without FHA and VA and Freddie and Fannie, you wouldn't have 90% of the houses in this country built. So it's incentivized by the federal government, and local governments will be part of that process. The city, the county, the state. We just approved a project that we just broke ground on out there in Ogden for senior housing, 70-some units. We're doing a Starway project with the city, the county, and the state. 30%, 60% AMI for 300-some units. We're doing our part. But I also want to go back to 10,000 units. If you told me you're going to put 10,000 units in the city of Wilmington, I would ask you where. I mean, we've got 51 square miles. We're 90-some% built out. And then you've got to deal with the citizens that may not want it in their backyard. And I hear a lot of that. I hear a lot about, let's go affordable, affordable, affordable. And then when you go to build it, you got the neighborhoods come out and says, whoa, wait a minute. So there's a lot of complex issues with this issue. And it's not going to be done overnight, but if we can build 20% here, 10% there, 5% here, that's a great thing. But also take into consideration, guys, that we're in a growing community, in a growing region. We've got developments that are taking place 10 miles outside of Wilmington, 20 miles outside of Wilmington, 25 miles outside of Wilmington. We've got 50 to 60,000 cars a day that are coming into New Hanover County of citizens that work here that don't live here. And we're dealing with that every single day. So your affordability, your affordable housing market is moving further and further out, just like it did in Raleigh, just like it did in Charlotte, just like it's doing in Asheville, and just like it's doing here. It's moving further and further out, which creates another issue for us, which comes back to traffic and traffic issues and Department of Transportation issues, in addition to the number of improvements that we're requiring now developers to have to put into the development that also drives up the cost, as well as environmental costs in respect to wetlands. It drives those costs up dramatically. For those of you that are in this business, you understand it. For those of you that are in banking, you understand it. Things changed dramatically in 2008 after the Great Recession and the number of developers that are out there. It's now coming down to bigger and bigger developers that would determine when they can develop and how they're going to develop. And it's changed a lot, and it's going to continue to change, and it is a challenge for all of us.
We've got a question from the audience that kind of goes along with that. Christy Spivey at table 18.
Hey, you guys have already touched on this a bit with the comprehensive plan, but my question was kind of along the other side of what you were just saying is, what are you doing to preserve the natural resources that make it such a great place that people want to come to? I'm thinking like Eagles Island for one example. And then on the other side of that too is coming from healthcare, we're interested in spaces that promote health for our citizens, blue zones and things like that. So you've touched on it a bit, but I wonder if you could speak some more on those two topics more specifically and what we're doing to preserve those.
Well, I could tell you on the environmental front, for those who have been in the development side, it is probably the #1 thing that we have to deal with not only the federal government in respect to the Corps of Engineers, but also our state government and our local governments. We all have regulations to protect the environment, to protect the tree canopy, to make sure that we're not developing in environmentally sensitive areas or destroying wetlands. And it is a challenge. So how those developments are created within tracts of land is critically important. Impervious surface, that's a big concept that we've been talking about, and especially down here in southeastern North Carolina, where we have a tremendous amount of rainfall at certain times of the year, having to deal with all of that stormwater, which takes time and effort, working with our engineering departments at the city, the state, and the federal government is not easy. And it takes a lot of time and effort, and there's a lot of debate about it. In addition to having to fix and retrofit a lot of our infrastructure to take care of a lot of the stormwater and the environmental impacts that have happened over many years, where you had maybe a 25-inch pipe, now you have to go to a 56, and having to retrofit those developments or those old developments that impact our environment is a lot of time and money.
I'm going to have to ask my last question now. I'm going to ask each of you, and I'll start with you, David. Think about how our community will develop in the next 20 years. What is one takeaway business people should take from today to plan for how we will grow?
Number one, I just wanted to pat Billy on the back. He said the right thing. We are highly restricted in what we can do. And most developers want to do the very best they can to enhance the quality of the life, if it's multifamily there or whatever. Your question now again, ask that question one more time.
So what do you think, what's one takeaway about growth that the people here, that business people can take away from today?
I'd be glad to talk to you about my thoughts on it anyway. The way I understand it, virtually 85% of our city is covered with a building or something at this point. So we got 15% left for new growth. Why has that 15% not been built on? Usually there's an issue. Either there's a wetlands issue there where you can't build it. It may be a brownfield issue where you cannot build on it or whatever. So I think over the next several years you may find we're seeing houses now being torn down on perfectly good lots and a new bigger one being built on it. You're going to start seeing that. If there are older downtown buildings that don't have the historical significance or whatever, they will disappear. And there will probably be an assemblage of properties there in order for you to build a building of size enough that it makes economic soundness to it. The city is doing a great job downtown right now. I'm very pleased with what they're doing there. We don't generally partner up with government organizations. We just like to call our own shots. But there may be more and more people are doing it. The cost to a developer to develop properties is getting at a point that there's the big private equity group coming in, the guys with the millions and millions of dollars, and we'll put it out there. The little guy like us, it's going to be really hard for them to stay in business over the next 20, 25 years, in my opinion.
Okay, and Donna, what's your take on that question? What is one takeaway business people should take from today to plan for how we will grow?
Well, I agree with David that I think that, and this is a wider conversation I think we need to involve the public in. We're very fortunate to have such great planning staffs here in New Hanover County, both the county and the city, lots of experience. I get lots of direction from them, that very good direction. But I think, this is it's going to be an ongoing conversation, and development trends are changing. They're changing all the time. Regulation is changing. I don't have to tell you all that. And so, yes, it's possible. We just have to all sit down and figure out how we're going to do it, how we move forward on this issue. So.
And Andy, what's your takeaway?
I think I would echo a lot of what we've just heard. As an area grows and the word is out about Wilmington, you've seen it in other cities. Mr. Swain's comments about outside developers of private equity funds and this coming in, that you might see that. I think one of the great things that I've noticed in my short period in Wilmington is that every single person sitting at the table here and other developers in town they live here. And I think that brings a unique perspective and a real dedication to the quality of the project. So echoing what Donna just said about it takes communication. There's a lot of business owners in this room. If you have an idea, expansion, space needs, as those are evolving and changing for you as business owners, I think it's important that, and please communicate it with us. There's a lot of really qualified developers in town that all have their niche and want to do the next project and do it with a local business that's growing. And so I think that's really important as we look at over the next 15 to 20 years of how we thoughtfully develop. And then the other thing being, I think you're going to see a lot of redevelopment as compared to new development. And that takes some creativity. That's what it's going to take to continue to deliver quality projects.
One thing that Andy just mentioned, we've not been affected by the interest rates. We've been very fortunate because we are private equity funded. But the one thing we can't control, unfortunately, that we've run into is the weather. And with all this rain that we've had, our project is like 3 weeks behind right now, and we've got pumps out there and still trying to get enforced mains and connectors and things like that, which it's impossible in this weather. So, you know, we have to also address those things we can't control. What we're doing is we're taking this 3-week period or whatever, and we're working with our clients that are already indicated an interest in being with us to redesign their projects. So this is giving us an opportunity to step back and do that. But there are things that you cannot, that don't fit into neat boxes.
How about you, Brian? What's your takeaway?
Absolutely expect redevelopment. About half of our developments. Marketplace Mall, we're tearing down a mall that was built in the 80s. Carolina Beach, we're tearing down a failed retail center and building mixed use. The Truist building down here, we tore down an old, functionally obsolete PNC building. It was a one-story building. I don't know if y'all remember that across from City Hall. So I think our community is going to look very, very different 20 years from now than it does today, and it's going to be done through redevelopment.
Okay, and take us home, Mayor Saffo. What's your takeaway?
That corny phrase, our future's so bright we have to wear shades. And that's the truth. And look, I deal a lot with the state demographers to determine where the growth patterns are in the state. And in the next 10 years, from 2020 to 2030, there will be 1 million additional people that will move into the state of North Carolina. The demographers at the state, which are pretty almost, they're spot on. The 4 areas of the state that have been identified with the highest growth, percentage of that growth, is Asheville-Buncombe, Charlotte-Meck, Raleigh-Durham-Chapel Hill, New Hanover, Pender, and Brunswick. That's where that growth is coming, and we're going to be dealing with it. Take into consideration today, from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, there's 1 million people. 1 million people. And they're continuing to move here. Wilmington changed, New Hanover County changed, southeastern North Carolina changed when Interstate 40 came here. And we've seen the trajectory of growth since that time in 1990. And it's not going to slow down. Remember, we're the largest city on the coast from the Virginia line to the South Carolina border. And if you want to live on the coast and you want things to do and you want diversity and you want jobs and you want things to do, you can go to Manio, yeah. You can go to the Outer Banks, you can go to Hyde County. But you're going to come to Wilmington. And we see the growth patterns from the triangle that are coming down here. And we did a study many years ago with the chamber to determine where the people were coming from. The #1 county in the entire country that sends us the most people is Wake. And the #1 state in the union that sends us the most people to southeastern North Carolina is North Carolina. So we've got that corridor, and it's coming, and they're coming also from Connecticut and New Jersey and in Northern Virginia and all that. But we will continue to see growth in the foreseeable future. What we as elected leaders have to deal with is how do we bring all these citizens into our community, into our region, without wrecking our quality of life? And it is a challenge. So going back to some of these things we talked about with nodes, people will live closer to where they work. They will also shop and do things closer to where they work, because getting around is going to be a little bit more difficult. When we were developing, when my father was developing, God bless him, 90-some years old, in the 60s and 70s, the predominant thinking was you build your residential over here, and you put your commercial 5 to 10 miles away over here, and it was great because you could get around town pretty easy. Well, you can't do that anymore. So you're going to have people living closer together. You're going to see a lot more infill development, as Brian alluded to. But this community will continue to prosper and grow. This is a great, great area. I mean, we've always been known for our beautiful beaches, but now we have this bookend of these beautiful beaches, and we have this beautiful downtown, historic downtown that is growing and prospering. We got this great river walk. We got one of the best amphitheaters in the entire country, in my opinion. We have a diversity of jobs. Every entity in our community is growing. Our university, 16 campuses, is third most popular. I think we could even beat Chapel Hill if they would let us. Great community college. I mean, we got a lot of great things happening here. So guys, make all the money you can. God bless you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, panelists. Another round of applause for everybody.
Good job, David.